Okay, so this video is about human rights and civil rights and the fight to achieve them. Malcolm X, he was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1925. He called Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. a traitor to his own people. It's actually true. Here's the thing about Malcolm X. He got a lot more achieved than Dr. Martin Luther King ever did. The Black Panthers achieved a lot more too. Now, a lot of people are trying to push a narrative about black people that ain't true. Of course, it's the same narrative that's pushed on those who are called mentally ill, those who are deemed disabled. Here in the United States, there are an equal number of disabled people and black people, about 60 million of each. However, disabled people are well over twice as likely to get killed by police. They're far less likely to have any sort of help. See, it's easy to look at a black person and see a black person. Not just a person, but a person who has had to go through some shit because of the color of their skin. Now, being called black does not necessarily get your rights taken away in the same fashion as being called mentally ill. Police are more likely to get away with killing someone who is called mentally ill. I want to go to Elijah McClain's situation. For months after Elijah McClain was killed, most people were just pushing the fact that he was black. The fact that he's autistic really didn't occur to most people, or didn't factor into it. Now, there's a movie called The Departed, and Leonardo DiCaprio's character talks about how police officers join the force because they want to shoot somebody. Ain't that the same reason people join the military? Now, there's a lot of people who did stupid things. Rather than fess up to it, they decided to play victim. Natalie Bollinger was one of these people. Natalie Bollinger and her twin sister Alicia, they knew that the narrative that they were selling was wrong. They knew it was immoral, but they did it anyway. The things that Natalie claimed were slander. Well, was she on heroin? You're damn right she was. How can that be slander? You also see on her last public post, if you go all the way back to the very, very beginning, she talks about how we did not have a sexual relationship. But you can see all the people on there commenting, trying to claim I'm some sort of a creeper after her vagina. Ain't that always the way it is? A woman destroys your life through slander, claims you're the one slandering her, and then doesn't fight to set things right. At least she admitted it on that post. But after she was killed, There are thousands of posts or thousands of replies on there. When Natalie was killed, her killer could have gotten away because of the way that she did things. Getting a protection order against me when I couldn't even show up to the courtroom. And as a result, when she was shot in the head, people came after me. Claimed that they were going to kill my family and kill my friends. Most of those friends I am no longer friends with. And there's other people who have done the same thing. Alicia Bollinger and two of her stepmothers tried pulling the same crap. Her two stepmothers were trying to pretend like they wanted to help me. Well, only when it was convenient for them. Now, I was incarcerated and prevented from going to my court dates. So if anything happens to any of those people, they look at me first. If anything happens to Alicia Bollinger, which on 3 different occasions when she has disappeared since her sister's death, people have gotten a hold of me to threaten my life and threaten to harm my family and my friends. If anything happens to Alicia Bollinger, chances are pretty good it's her dad or one of her drug dealers. But I'll be the one who has to take the flak. After you're accused of the bullshit like what happened to Natalie, people go out of their way at every turn to try to blame you for whatever they can. When Selena Not Afraid disappeared, I had people threatening to kill me too. When Alicia Bollinger disappeared 3 different times, her friend Bobby Forrest, got a hold of me to let me know she was missing and he needed help finding her. He was worried about her. Of course, Alicia's family are a bunch of game-playing druggies. Mr. Forrest can't do nothing about that. A lot of people wanted to offer me help, but not actually follow through. A lot of the help that they wanted me to get was expensive. But I was promised if I do this or I do that, then they'll help me. And once my money was gone, their help was gone. As if they ever helped to begin with. There are some of them who had great intentions, but then when they realized they were going to have to do something, well, lots of people want to talk about the work. Most people don't want to do it. Natalie's ex-stepmothers, Rochelle Shelley Campbell and Danica Garner, I believe, both pretended like they were going to help me. They were in cahoots with some web sleuths. These are people they didn't know in person. These are people that they had being the go-between. Well, that ended up being a very screwed up situation. It resulted in me ultimately having a meltdown. I had to do something desperate to try to get someone to take a look, to try to force the police to do their jobs. But you really can't, can you? Now, if anything happens to Rochelle Shelley Campbell or Danica Garner, first person they're going to try blaming is me. And as we know from past experience, that's going to result in people threatening my life and threatening to harm my loved ones. If Alicia Bollinger was a decent fucking person, she would have put a stop to this all the way in Virginia in 2016. But just like Natalie, she wanted to make her mommy happy. There's something even worse here. The homeless population is around about 500,000 people. That's only 1/120th the population of black people or disabled people in the United States. However, they account for 49% of the people killed by the police, law enforcement nationwide. 500,000 people. They account for over 2.5 times as many deaths as the black population at the hands of the police. Imagine that. Now, I got locked up for crimes I didn't commit. The people that I was trying to turn in. I was trying to turn in Robert Warnick for the 5th or 6th time because he assaulted me after threatening to kill me on multiple occasions. Now, they did the same thing that these predators always do. When cops are screwed up, and yes, in all of these instances, I had to deal with cops that I had issues with prior. The reason I had issues with them prior is because they gave me the whole runaround that they give a male. If you have a penis, nobody cares. You just need to man up. That's what you're told. Lovely, huh? I've had multiple people tell me that they take threats against their lives very seriously. Well, so do I. Especially since there are so many people who are actually dead. One thing that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had to say, he said that he fights for our rights. He doesn't just fight for black rights. Because if he just fought for black rights, who's going to fight for his? He understood that black people just simply don't have the numbers to do it alone. Then again, so did Malcolm X. I was in Lincoln Correction Center because Leslie knew that I was going to press charges against her for trying to give out my phone number. She knew exactly what she was doing. I have video on my computers of prior interactions where I am trying to turn in the predators who keep calling me from restricted numbers. Now, mind you, Duval County Sheriff's Department has also called me from restricted numbers. And until the assault by Sheriff Scott DaCosta in December of last year, the Nebraska State Patrol Troop E had only called me from restricted numbers. This according to Sergeant Jones of Nebraska State Patrol Troop E, who, by the way, when I was incarcerated, I was told repeatedly that she does not exist. Imagine that. There is a time for peace, and there's a time for war. I hate war. I hate the thought of people dying. But people die all the time, don't they? None of us get to live forever. Now, there was a thing on the internet by T.D. Jakes where he's talking about how we all deserve to die. He's not the only one. Pastor Joel Osteen has one similar. How we all fall short of the glory of God and we all deserve to die for our sins. Well, okay. We're all going to get old and we're all going to die. All of us. That is a fact. That's not a threat. That's not an assumption. It is a fact. Most of us will not live to see 100. None of us will live to see 200. Now, there's a lot of people who don't like me. I get that. When it comes to incarceration, there are pros and cons. For me, I feel that I would be better off. Well, not me, but my loved ones would be better off if I were incarcerated. Because see, here's the thing. Here's a lesson that Leslie should have learned, and Danica should have learned, and Rochelle should have learned, and Alicia should have learned when Natalie Bollinger was shot in the head. You go crying wolf and playing victim, they may never find your killer. Someone innocent, somebody who is a decent fucking person, might end up in prison for the rest of their life for something they didn't even do. Now, luckily, they caught Joseph Michael Lopez, and he is in prison for shooting Natalie in the head. But what happens if someone takes a look and says, oh, well, I could get away with killing Alicia, and I'll just blame it on Sean Schwartz. Or I could get away with killing Danica Garner, and I'll just blame it on Sean Schwartz. Same thing with Leslie. Same thing with all of these people who wanted to play victim when they got busted lying and manipulating and taking advantage of an innocent man. Kara Johnson Miles helped out Danica Garner and Rochelle Shelley Campbell in their head games. Now, I just spent 7 months in prison for crimes that I didn't commit. I did not commit these crimes, yet I spent 7 months incarcerated without even being allowed to enter a plea. That's right, folks. They dropped the charges because there's no evidence. Yet, they locked me up for 7 months. And not just in local jails. They literally sent me to prison. Imagine that. And my public pretender, Robert Harvoy, did nothing. He wasted my time. He was a rubber stamp for the prosecution. Now, when it comes to our rights, there's a reason that I fight for black rights. It's because I recognize that if they take those rights away from black people, they can just as easily take them away from me, if not more so. Because I've been called mentally ill. Because I'm basically homeless. Even when I'm staying on somebody's couch. We need to work together. But we got a lot of people who shoot themselves in the feet. I don't mean literally, I mean figuratively. And I know there's a lot of nut jobs out there who want to twist my words into something they're not. But it's also because of those nut jobs that I have to get a court date with Alicia Bollinger. Get her to speak up and tell the fucking truth. The horrible things that she did in 2016, 2017, and 2018 got more than just her sister killed. And I know that these nut jobs out there, these internet sleuths, some of them are severely screwed up in the head. Some of them might actually go after my loved ones. They might actually go after my nieces or my sister. And what am I going to do about it? What am I even able to do about it? Now, there's a guy on here, he kept on commenting, wanting to play it off like he knows things that he doesn't. Play it off like being charged with something automatically makes you guilty. Well, no. They dropped the charges, and my paperwork says it's because they don't have any evidence. Whew. Imagine that. I got a new public defender when I was transferred from Lincoln Correctional Center to Scottsbluff County Jail. Train. My new public defender in Scottsbluff actually did something. She did what I asked her to. She did what I had asked Robert Harboy to do for 6 months, and he did not. And that was to take a look at the fact that I was never, ever served a warrant. Never served paperwork. When they seized my things. Imagine that. Now these things that they were claiming that I did, and claiming that they had evidence of, they had no evidence of. But it didn't matter because I had no one fighting for me in my corner. Is that true? No, it's not. My autism advocate's doing her best. But the other thing is, we were nearly completely cut off the entire time I was incarcerated in Lincoln. Law enforcement and the guards did everything that they could to make my life a living hell and try to get me to plead out. Well, that's not going to happen. They had to drop the charges for a reason. But the other thing is, if I'm locked up and something happens to any of these morons who wanted to cry wolf, from Leslie to Robert to Danica to Alicia to Rochelle, if anything happens to any of these people and I'm incarcerated, they're going to know it's not me. And they'll have to actually try to find whoever actually did it. Whereas in the situation with Natalie, they didn't even try looking at any other leads for the first month. That was it. Imagine that. Now, if I'm out and about, we get to encounter the situation that happened with Alicia 3 different times, where she decided to get all drugged out of her gourd and run away. And what happened then? That's right. People threatened to kill me and threatened to kill my family and threatened to kill my friends. Not okay. If something happens to Danica or her children, people are going to come after me. If anything happens to Leslie or her children, people are going to come after me. Leslie tried to pretend like I had threatened her life and threatened her children's lives. And meanwhile, you can take a look back through all my videos. The closest thing to a threat was me threatening to call the Nebraska State Patrol on her, because that's who I was told to contact. And by the way, that wasn't a threat. I followed through. I did call the Nebraska State Patrol Troop E, Sergeant Jones. It was the right thing to do. So what did Leslie do? Leslie is friends with Robert Warnick. She also works for Dual County Sheriff Scott DaCosta. And every time that I've had to go to this crooked department, the same thing happens. I get locked up. The crimes against me are ignored over and over again. They incarcerate me to prevent me from having access to the evidence or the courts. What Leslie did is felonious. It's not a misdemeanor, although there are misdemeanors involved. The fact is, she committed felonies. Scott DaCosta committed felonies. Jared Hahn committed felonies. Cody Selhorst committed felonies. Felonies. Same thing with Robert, also committed felonies. And former sheriff's deputy in Colorado, William Barr, as well committed felonies. I was also illegally prevented from going to my court dates repeatedly. I was separated from my money. I was separated from my phones and from the phone numbers that are on them. All over bogus warrants. Warrants that didn't actually exist or were otherwise illegal. I got most of my evidence back, but there's a little audio recording device that has not been returned to me. I don't want to be here in this town. I don't want to be anywhere near these predators. This town is full of child molesters and rapists. Incest in a town like this is popular. Just part of the reason I don't like popular. I don't care what's popular, I care what's right. Now, if anything happens to Leslie or her kids, anybody could go, you know, if something happens to them, Sean's going to get blamed, so I'll probably get away with it. That's just sick. There's a good chance that's what happened with Natalie. Joseph Lopez was willing to let some disabled homeless dude take the fall for his crime. If Leslie's husband decides to shoot her in the head or strangle her to death, chances are pretty good they'll try to blame it on me. If Ted Bollinger decides to rape one of his kids again and decides that this time it's too much of a risk, he might strangle one of his own kids to death. And they'll try blaming it on me. If Danica Garner relapses and goes on a drug binge and ends up dead, overdosed or shot in the head by some drug dealer, chances are pretty good people will come after me and mine. These guys knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing is wrong. If you listen to that video between me and Leslie Snell, you get to hear that in that video alone, not once, but twice, she tried to give out my phone number. Now, I did call Nebraska State Patrol. What I threatened to do is if she gave out my number, that I would give out hers. But did I give out her phone number? Of course not. I hung up on her twice before she was able to read off my whole phone number. But Leslie, she tried to pretend like I was threatening to kill her family or some crazy shit like that. Even brought her kids into it. Imagine that. I wouldn't even know her kids if I saw them. Now, she lives literally across the street from Robert, who threatened my life on 2 separate occasions before assaulting me in the middle of the street. And he got in no trouble for it, so far as I can see. There's also the fact that because of the court order from Leslie Snell, which, by the way, is another one of those situations where I was not allowed to go. It's funny how they're only willing to even try to get a protection order when they know I will be prevented from going to court. I was incarcerated. How am I supposed to make it to court when I'm incarcerated? Not only that, I was incarcerated on bogus charges. Now, who are those bogus charges from? Well, let's start off with Leslie, William Barr, Scott DaCosta, and Robert Warnick. All 4 of the people that I was trying to take to court and was very, very vocal about it on YouTube. Well, why was I so vocal about it on YouTube? So that if they tried to pull some bullshit like they pulled, I could say, hey, I was trying, and I did document it, and I made sure I documented it in public, just in case there's somebody out there who actually does care enough to take a look. Some of the prison guards took a look. The prison guards who stopped and got to know me, we got along quite well. But there's a lot of them who assume that because you're in prison, you must be guilty. Well, that ain't right. Incarceration does not mean guilty. Now, all this time, I've been trying to show actual evidence. However, that's not how a court of law works. That's how we are told that it's supposed to work. But in reality, it doesn't matter how much evidence you have. It matters about your reputation. If you've got a badge, then your words don't have to be backed up by evidence. If you were called mentally ill, it doesn't matter how much evidence you have, nobody's going to listen. Now, my judge was Randon Rowland. Now, there's another judge, something Weimer. here's the way that they were able to pull the bullshit that they did. The incarceration on criminal charges that were bogus prevented me from going to civil court against Leslie. And Leslie works for the Dual County Sheriff's Office. So she wrote down Dual County Sheriff's Office and 718 3rd Street as places that I can't contact. Well, what's 718 3rd Street? That's the Dual County Courthouse. The Dual County Sheriff's Office is located within the Dual County Courthouse at 718 3rd Street. Now, William Barr also tried to pretend in a very similar fashion, but that's the difference between criminal and civil. There were criminal charges pressed against me with the William Barr situation, and civil charges with the Leslie situation. And meanwhile, everything that I have to do in order to remedy the situation requires going to 718 3rd Street to the courthouse that I'm not allowed to go to. So I was illegally prevented from defending myself by a civil protection order that was bullshit, where the woman outright lied, misled information, left information out, and pretended like I was threatening her and her children. What do her children have to do with this? Her children didn't try to give out my phone number. Her children aren't protecting the child molester across the street or the crooked sheriff. I am not God. According to the Bible, God punishes children to the 4th or 5th generations. I am not God. I am a lot nicer than God. Why is this? Because I'm not going to punish children for what their parents did. I didn't punish Amy Kingery's children for the things that Amy did. I did not punish Rayanna Ingersoll's children for the things that Rayanna did. Robert Warnick also tried to pretend like I would harm his children. William Barr, well, he knows how to manipulate people. Of course he does. He went to school to be a police officer. All of these people who would be going to prison, would literally be in prison right now for the crimes they committed. All of them used the fact that they had unprotected sex, basically, to get away with the crimes that they did commit. These crimes were committed. But because their unprotected sex resulted in babies, they get to pretend like I'm some sort of a monster going after their kids. Meanwhile, there is no evidence of any such a thing. Do you know why? Because no such thing ever occurred. Children come first, always. Always. One of the toughest things I ever had to do was to make the decision to call 911 when I was in Rawlins, Wyoming. Don't get me wrong, Amy Kingery's children were not well behaved. We were in an RV park where those children could have been abducted at any point in time by anyone. And they didn't want to inform us when they were going away or walking away or anything of that nature like they were supposed to. And yeah, they did. Sorry, train. They did pretend that Rayanna was not feeding them, which was an outright lie. Rayanna absolutely was feeding them. But Rayanna was also hitting them. And some of you are going to say, oh, well, if they were misbehaving, they had it coming. Well, I disagree. Because when they were getting smacked around, it wasn't for misbehaving, it was because Rayanna missed her sons. Rayanna's dead now. Rayanna is dead. She's one of many people who have died on me in the past few years. She's also one of the few who ever apologized. Accusing somebody of committing a crime falsely is against the law. False reporting is against the law. The evidence I have could put a lot of people in prison, but someone has to help me to go through it. Now, my public defender that I got in Scottsbluff thinks that I should sue the Dual County Sheriff's Department, as well as the Sydney Police Department and the Nebraska State Patrol for the crimes they committed against me. I should. She's right. But how? Y'all got no idea how many tens of thousands of dollars it cost me just to try to exist through all this. It costs $12,000 a year to jump through all the hoops for being falsely accused. Meanwhile, the crimes that I was charged with in Colorado with Officer Waylon Lolatai, they had to drop the charges because they were bogus. The same thing in Larimer County, Colorado, at Clearview Behavioral Health. They had to drop the charges, but guess what? They held on to them charges for about 4 years. They try to hold on to these charges as long as they can to prevent you from being able to turn them in until the statute of limitations is over. And what I'm dealing with right now, in the 7 months that I was incarcerated, Scott DaCosta was allowed to legally destroy evidence of crimes by his officers and his deputies. There's no other law enforcement in Dual County. There are 2 towns, both of them less than 1,000 people. There might be less than 1,000 people between both of them. We have the Sheriff's Department, and that's it. Nebraska State Patrol is supposed to do something, but they don't. Everybody tells me it's someone else's job. Now, I've got recordings between myself and my autism advocate. The phone calls that we were making just before I was arrested, literally the night before. Conversations that we had, as well as conversations with my public pretenders throughout the years. The cops got a hold of that. Now they're supposed to send it to North Platte. What's in North Platte? Well, that's where the Dual County Sheriff's Department is supposed to send all electronic information legally. But they didn't. They did not send it to North Platte. Why is that? Because if it had actually been investigated, DaCosta would be in prison. Leslie would be in prison. William Barr would be in prison. And so would Robert Warnick.